Oh, Benjamin, every great story has a bit of shadow in it. Without the shadow, we wouldn't know how bright the light is. Let's continue our story, my dear. I know all of you will love this story.
Once, in an age when magic was as real as the air we breathe, there stood a kingdom that was the envy of the world. At its heart was a castle carved from white marble with spires that pierced the clouds. But inside lived a prince whose heart was as cold as the winter frost. He was young, handsome, and surrounded by every luxury imaginable, yet he was hollow. He looked upon his subjects not as people, but as pawns. He valued only the superficial, the sparkle of a diamond, the curve of a statue, the perfection of a face. On one fateful night, the prince was hosting a grand ball. The air was filled with the scent of roasted meats and expensive wines. Violins played a frantic, joyful tune. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors creaked open. A blast of icy wind extinguished half the candles. An old woman, hunched and shivering in tattered rags, limped into the ballroom. She held a single thorns-covered red rose. She offered it to the prince in exchange for one night of shelter from the howling storm. The music stopped. The prince looked at her gnarled hands and dirty cloak and let out a cruel, booming laugh. "You expect me to let a withered creature like you stay in my palace for a mere flower?" he sneered. He commanded his guards to throw her back into the freezing rain. But as the guards approached, the old woman's form began to glow with a blinding ethereal light. Her rags transformed into shimmering silk, her hunched back straightened. In her place stood a magnificent enchantress. The guests fell to their knees in terror. The prince tried to apologize, but it was too late. "You have seen only with your eyes," she said, her voice echoing like thunder. "You have no love in your heart, so you shall become a reflection of the beast you are inside." With a wave of her hand, the castle began to warp. The marble turned to jagged gray stone. The servants began to fade, their souls trapped in the very objects they polished. And the prince, his skin grew thick with fur, his fingernails became claws, and his handsome face twisted into a snout of rage. The enchantress left him with the rose, telling him, "This rose will bloom until your 21st year. If you can learn to love another and earn their love in return by the time the last petal falls, the spell will be broken. If not, you will be doomed to remain a beast forever." Miles away, far from the shadowed forest that now hid the cursed castle, lived a girl named Belle. She was a radiant light in a dull provincial town. While the other villagers were content with their simple, repetitive lives, Belle's mind was always elsewhere, trapped in the pages of the books she borrowed from the local library. She read of far-off places, daring sword fights, and princes in disguise. To the villagers, she was an oddity, a beautiful girl who didn't fit in. Her father, Maurice, was an eccentric inventor, a man with a mind full of gears and dreams. They were poor, but they had each other. But Belle had a shadow following her, Gaston. He was the village hero, a hunter with muscles as large as his ego. He saw Belle not as a person, but as a trophy, the only girl in town worthy of his perfection. He didn't care for her mind, he only wanted her beauty. Belle, however, saw through his golden boy exterior. She saw the brute inside. Little did she know she was about to meet a real brute with a man hidden inside. One morning, Maurice set off for a fair with his latest invention, promising Belle he would return with a gift. A rose, she had asked, just a single rose. As he journeyed through the woods, a sudden, unnatural fog descended. The birds stopped singing, the temperature dropped until his breath turned to mist. Wolves began to howl in the darkness, their eyes glowing like embers. Terrified, Maurice ran blindly through the brambles until he stumbled upon a massive iron gate. Maurice pushed open the rusted iron gates, which groaned as if warning him to stay away. He found himself in a courtyard where the grass was frozen mid-sway, and the statues seemed to watch his every move with hollow eyes. Seeking warmth, he entered the grand hall. To his amazement, the candles lit themselves as he passed. A table was set with steaming tea and bread, yet no host appeared. After eating, he wandered into the garden where he saw a bush of roses so red they looked like drops of blood on the snow. Remembering Belle's wish, he reached out and plucked the most beautiful one. A roar shattered the silence, a sound that was half lion, half thunder. The beast lunged from the balcony, pinning the old man to the frozen ground. I gave you heat, I gave you food, and you repay me by stealing my most precious possession? The beast growled, his hot breath smelling of raw earth and ancient sorrow. Maurice pleaded for his life, speaking of his daughter, but the beast's heart was still a fortress of ice. You shall stay here forever, the monster decreed, dragging the old man to a cold, damp cell in the highest tower. Back in the village, Maurice's horse returned alone. Belle, sensing a cold dread in her chest, followed the horse back into the dark woods. When she arrived at the castle, she didn't see a fairy tale, she saw a tomb. She found her father shivering in the tower. Before she could plot an escape, the beast emerged from the shadows. Belle gasped, her eyes widening at the sight of his massive horns and matted fur, but she did not run.
Take me instead.
The beast was stunned. No one had ever offered him anything, let alone his life. He agreed, sending Maurice back to the village and locking Belle in a room that was beautiful, yet felt like a golden cage. The first few weeks were a battle of wills. The beast was a creature of habit and rage. He expected Belle to cower, to scream, or to beg. But Belle was a spirit of fire. She refused to attend his dinners, she spoke back to his growls, and she treated his castle not as a prison, but as a mystery to be solved. One evening, after a particularly loud argument, the beast found Belle in the west wing, the forbidden part of the castle. He roared in such a fury that she fled into the night, straight into the path of a pack of starving wolves. Just as the wolves prepared to strike, a massive shadow fell over her. The beast fought the pack with a ferocity she had never seen, taking deep wounds to save her. In that moment, as she helped the limping monster back to the castle and tended to his wounds, the air between them changed. The monster began to show glimpses of the prince. He showed her his library, a room with shelves that touched the heavens. They spent hours there, her reading aloud and him listening, remembering what it felt like to be human. They began to walk together in the gardens. He learned to use a spoon. She learned to laugh at his clumsy attempts to be a gentleman. The servants, now clocks and candelabras, watched with bated breath as the enchanted rose in the west wing dropped petal after petal. The prince was changing. He began to care more for Belle's happiness than his own curse. He gave her a magic mirror, and through it she saw her father lost in the woods, dying of pneumonia. The beast saw the agony in her eyes. He knew that the rose had only 2 petals left. If she stayed, he might be saved. If she left, he would be a beast forever. In the greatest act of love he had ever performed, he took her hand and said,
"You are not my prisoner."
He gave her the mirror so she would always have a way to look back at him. As she rode away, the beast climbed to the highest turret and let out a howl of pure, unadulterated heartbreak. He had finally learned to love, but in doing so, he had lost the only thing worth living for. Belle found her father and nursed him back to health, but the peace was short-lived. Gaston, fueled by a toxic mix of jealousy and madness, had convinced the village that the beast was a man-eating demon who'd brainwashed Belle. He whipped the crowd into a frenzy, their torches flickering like angry orange eyes in the night. "Kill the beast," they chanted, marching toward the forest with pitchforks and cold steel. The mob broke down the castle doors, but the beast did not fight back. He sat in his chair, staring at the floor, waiting for the end. He didn't care for his life if Belle wasn't there to share it. Gaston found him and began a brutal assault, mocking the creature's silence. It wasn't until Belle's voice rang out through the courtyard,
"Stop right now!"
"Stop!" that the beast found the strength to move. He fought Gaston on the rain-slicked rooftops, eventually pinning him over the edge. Gaston begged for his life, and the beast, seeing his own former reflection in the man's cowardly eyes, let him go. "Get out," he whispered. But as the beast turned to reach for Belle's hand, Gaston plunged a dagger into his back before falling to his own death in the chasm below. Belle held the beast as he slumped to the ground, his breathing shallow and ragged. Around them, the castle seemed to be dying with him. "You came back," he wheezed, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "I'm sorry I was late," Belle sobbed, her tears falling on his fur. The beast's eyes began to close. The last petal hit the wood. For a second, there was total, crushing silence. Then a spark of gold erupted from the beast's heart. The ground shook. Beams of pure light shot out from his body, lifting him into the air. The fur receded, the claws vanished, and the horns melted away. The man who stepped out of the light was the prince, but his eyes were no longer cold. They were deep pools of gratitude and love. Across the castle, the spell broke. The clock became a head butler, the candelabra a charming valet. The sun broke through the clouds for the first time in 20 years, bathing the kingdom in warmth. The curse was over, not because of magic, but because a girl had the courage to love a monster, and a monster had the courage to become a man.